Here we have come into this sacred space, quieter now with our readiness, hushed voices, hoping, trusting for so many things, for connection, for communion, for inspiration, for information, for healing, for wholeness, for words, for music, for celebration and consolation. Here we have come into this space, bringing all of who we are. Let us be willing, however we are changed. Good morning. Our opening words today were written by Katie Kandarian Morris. I am Jessica Ryan, and I'll be your worship associate for today's service. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon. We are an inclusive community that affirms heart, mind, and body in our search for truth and meaning. Everyone is welcome, whatever your age, income, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, or your life story. You are welcome, whether you are full of joy or your heart is hurting. Your beliefs may differ from mine, but if you are called to love, you are welcome.
Now please join me in singing our opening song, We Laugh, We Cry. We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder and with a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and heart to the spirit of this child. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger on and on. And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer.
Good morning. My name is Heather McNeil.
And my name is Jamie Rose McNeil.
Please join us in lighting your own chalice as we light ours. Our words come from Alice Walker, author of many books, including The Color Purple.
Nuestras palabras vienen de la autora Alice Walker, quien ha escrito muchos libros, incluyendo El color morado.
Storytelling is how we survive.
Contando historias es como sobrevivimos.
When there's no food, the story feeds something.
Cuando no hay comida, la historia alimenta algo.
It feeds the spirit, the imagination.
Alimenta el espíritu, la imaginación.
That's how we learn.
Así es como aprendemos.
It connects us heart to heart.
Nos conecta de corazón a corazón.
Now, after that beautiful chalice lighting reading, please join me in singing our response, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Good morning. I'm Chela Sloper, your congregational life facilitator, and I have today's announcements. Firstly, a very warm welcome to all of you who are at the service today, and a special welcome to those who are visiting, maybe for the first or second time. And because I know many things, I know that at today's service, we have people tuning in from Seattle, Arizona, and Mexico. So this is very exciting in these days of Zoom. But if you are visiting and you'd like to fill out a virtual visitor information form, we'll have that in the chat. And let us know that you're here, and then that's also the best way to sign up for our communications if you'd like to stay in touch with us, and we can stay in touch with you. So the first big hooray is that we had the annual Winter Talent Show on Friday, and it was just a hoot. So get this, the performers spanned 8 decades. We didn't have representatives from every decade, but we spanned that much time in the ages of the performers. I think that will be a target for next year, is to have every decade represented. It was pretty remarkable. So big thanks for all of you who performed, all of you who came to be the appreciative audience, and we'll look for next year's talent show as well. So you can start practicing now. So of course today is the mid-year congregational meeting. Everyone is invited to attend, and members are strongly encouraged. Since there is a matter that will be coming for a vote, we will need to have a certain quorum met. So I'm not going to tell you what that is so that you would count off and let yourself off the hook. But I want you all, all the members, those who have signed our membership book, to stick around after the service, and then we'll start that mid-year meeting at about 11:05 or after a certain break after the service is done. Tuesday, we have the Women's Connections monthly meeting, which is laughter yoga. Just having opportunities for emotional release this last week. I know that laughter is sometimes one of those best releases. So RSVP to Women's Connections at uufco.org if you'd like to attend. That'll be 3:30 on Tuesday. This Friday, our homeless outreach project meets at 5 o'clock, also on Zoom. The link will be on the calendar. But if you've been interested in finding a way to help meet the needs of our community, especially those of our neighbors who are houseless, please do attend that meeting. And then also thinking about next Sunday on the 31st, that's the last Sunday of the month. So we'll have our Greater Community Collection offering. And this month, what we're going to be doing is using all of the offering for the GCC and distributing it or having it available for our congregation's social justice projects. So there are 8 projects currently operational. There'll be information about that in this week's email. So that'll be next Sunday's Greater Community Collection offering. And then, of course, later today, we'll have an opportunity to give to the financial support of this congregation. Lastly, I just want you to mark your calendars for Wednesday, February 3rd. That will be the first Wednesday of the month in February. Can you believe it? We're on our way into February already. So that'll be it. There will be a contemplative midweek service on Wednesday, February 3rd at 7:30. So just have that in your mind. It's been a really marvelous time to meet with a more casual opportunity with some opportunity also for engagement and discussion. So I think that is it for today. And there was a question, was the talent show recorded? No, we decided not to record it since that would have taken a variety of releases and various things like that. So it wasn't recorded, but we'll tell you in detail about it if you want to ask me. So anyway, that said, I wish blessings on your day.
Hello, if you are just joining us, my name is Heather McNeil, and I have a story for all ages. It's a story about a mouse today. Now, this mouse spent all of his days doing very mousy things, skittering about looking for seeds and nuts and berries, trying to escape from cats and rats and traps, and playing with all 149 of his brothers and sisters. But one day, a seagull landed right near all of those mice, and all day the seagull talked about something called the ocean. Well, the mice had never heard about the ocean, and so they listened carefully as he described the smell of the ocean and the feel of the ocean breezes, and then he flew away. But our little mouse never forgot anything that seagull had said. And so that night he went to his parents and he said,
I am going to the ocean.
No, you're not, said his father. If you went to the ocean, you might get caught in a trap.
Oh,
said the little mouse. So he didn't go to the ocean. But a few days later, the seagull returned. And this time, the seagull talked about the creatures of the ocean, things that rose up out of the water and little strange creatures that scuttled across the sand. Oh, it was amazing. So that night, the little mouse went to his parents again and he said,
I am going to the ocean.
No, you're not, said his mother. If you went to the ocean, why, a cat might get you.
Oh,
said the mouse. So he didn't go to the ocean. But a few days later, the seagull returned, and this time he sang songs about the ocean, and he told stories about the ocean. And that night, the little mouse went to his parents. He said,
I am going to the ocean.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
Oh, said his parents. Well, then be very careful and come home soon. We love you very much. So the very next day, the little mouse set out on his journey toward the ocean. You know what he learned right away? His parents were right. There were rats and cats and traps, so that when when his journey was almost over, most of his whiskers were gone and a piece of his tail was missing and his fur was a mess. It was a very tired, bedraggled little mouse that climbed his way up a sand dune late one afternoon, looked out, and saw the ocean. Oh, it was even more amazing than he could ever have imagined. For a while, he just sat and watched the waves. Whoosh, whoosh. And then he ran back down the sand dune and he ran up and down the beach, leaving little mouse tracks. He loved to watch how they disappeared. And then when he ran again, they reappeared. He met a crab and they had a wonderful conversation. He felt the ocean breezes in his fur and he smelled the salt in the air. As the sun began to set, he climbed back up the sand dune and he sat and watched as the sun set. Oh, it was wonderful. The next day, he returned to his family, and oh, they were very glad to see him. His mother hugged him, his father hugged him, all 149 of his brothers and sisters hugged him. And then he started talking about the ocean. In fact, he told them about the ocean every day for the rest of his life. He sang stories about the ocean. He told stories and songs, and he talked about his adventures, because this little mouse knew something very important. He knew that sometimes a great risk is necessary in order to bring great rewards. And that's our story, The Mouse at the Seashore, which can be found in a book called Fables by Arnold Lobel. Thank you.
Please join me in saying the Children's Covenant. In this place, I am kind. In this place, I am loving. In this place, I am a friend to the earth and all animals and people. In this place, I am loved. We now open the time to share our joys and sorrows. You may be full of joy this morning, or your heart may be hurting. This is a time where we may share what is in our hearts and connect with the community gathered here today. The chat box is now open for sharing our joys and sorrows.
This morning, I have chosen music that tells stories. And in music, the story, they give a subject matter, and it's up for us to reveal the details of that story. And I've always been intrigued with this in music. The first piece I played for the prelude was called Reverie. So the reverie is our own individual dream, whether awake or asleep. And the song that, the piece that I'm going to play, also by Debussy, As You Share Your Joys and Sorrows, is called The Girl with the Flaxen Hair.
Heather McNeil is a third-generation storyteller, following the tradition of her grandfather, aunt, and mother. She represented the United States at international storytelling festivals in New Zealand and Scotland, and she is the author of 2 books based on collecting stories in Kenya and in the Hebrides, Hyena and the Moon, Stories to Tell from Kenya, and The Celtic Breeze, Stories of the Other Worlds in Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Heather has performed at schools, libraries, and conferences throughout the United States and has led numerous workshops. She has been described as Oscar-worthy. Heather will be speaking about the power of story, providing examples, both humorous and profound, of how stories have impacted her and others. She will explain how we are all storytellers of one sort and another, about the importance of respect for the culture and history of a story, and how stories open our minds and hearts to the minds and hearts of others. And of course, she'll tell a tale or two. In Heather's words, "My storytelling is about bringing to life traditional and literary tales through my imagination and creative interpretation. I want listeners to appreciate the importance of storytelling as an oral art that has bonded people for thousands of years." A warm welcome to Heather today.
Thank you, Jessica. I am so honored to be invited to speak with all of you about the power of story, which has impacted me throughout my life. I believe stories are part of what makes us human. We hunger for stories. In fact, Jonathan Gottschall, author of The Storytelling Animal, said, "We are, as a species, addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories." Stories have the power to change us. I believe they make us to understand better who we are, where we came from, who we can be. In fact, to quote one great philosopher, "What unites people? Armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it." Those words come from the wisdom of Lord Tyrion Lannister, a competitor in the Game of Thrones. I am a professional performance storyteller, which means hours of research and rehearsal for each and every story, as well as copyright consideration, cultural sensitivity, the ability to be comfortable with large crowds and public speaking and microphones, as well as lots of travel. But today with you, I'm taking the word story in the broadest sense. It can be just singing a cumulative song in the car where everybody in the family adds on another verse. That's a story. Or it can be hearing again the family story about how your father rode his bobsled down a hill, crashed into a barn, and survived the ensuing total destruction of the barn, which, by the way, is a true story in my family. It can be sharing a favorite joke or relating the frustrating experience you had at the Social Security office. It can be as simple as sitting on the couch with your grandchild and pretending that the shoe on the floor is an approaching shark, or listening to a master storyteller tell the Celtic tragedy of Deirdre of the Sorrows. It is the stories that Amy and Scott tell us each week. So why is storytelling so important? I'm going to give you 9 reasons, along with examples from my own experience as to how powerful stories can be in our lives. The first reason for telling a story is to teach. And so I'm going to tell you a story so that you have an idea of what I mean by the power of stories. There was once a woodcutter who worked very hard every day, long days. He would go out into the forest, cut down trees, chop up the tree into logs, lift the logs and load them into his cart, pull the cart all the way back to his hut, unload the logs so that he could then sell them to the people in the village. His days were such hard labor that every evening when he got home, he was exhausted, much too tired to play games or tell stories to his children. He was sometimes even so tired he couldn't eat dinner, and he would just fall asleep without even speaking to his wife. As a result, as the days and weeks and months went by, this woodcutter became a stranger to his family. Now, one day when he went out into the forest, much to his surprise, he found a lion. Now, of course, like you and me, his first instinct was to turn and run away, but before he could get away, the lion spoke. "Woodcutter, do not be afraid. I have seen how hard you work each and every day, and I am here to help you. Please, let me do what I can." "You want to help me? How are you going to help me?" asked the woodcutter. "When you cut down the trees and chop them into logs, load them onto my back, and then I will carry them to the cart. I will pull the cart back to your hut at the end of the day. That is what I can do to help you." The woodcutter agreed, and so all day they worked side by side. He would cut down the trees, chop them into logs, load the logs onto the lion's back. The lion would carry them to the cart where he would unload them. And then at the end of the day, the lion pulled the cart back to the hut. That evening, the woodcutter had enough energy to eat dinner, and he even spoke a few words to his wife. Now, the next day, much to his delight, when he went out into the forest, the lion was there again. And again, all day they worked together, doing exactly what the lion had described. And the next day, and the next. Now, when the woodcutter went home in the evenings, he had enough energy to play a game with his children and to sing songs and tell stories. He talked to his wife and he held her in his arms before they fell asleep. One day, when he went out into the forest, there was the lion. They worked together, and they stopped in the middle of the afternoon for some bread and cheese. The lion lay down beside him, and he laid his head in the woodcutter's lap. He looked up at the woodcutter, and he said, "Woodcutter, do you love me?" Do I love you? Yes. Yes, I do. I love you." "You love me. How much?" I love you like a son. We work well together and we are a partnership, like a son." "Really? You love me like a son?" The lion was very pleased to hear those words as he laid his head again in the woodcutter's lap for a short rest. The next day, the lion was there again, and again when they rested, he asked the woodcutter the same words. "Woodcutter, do you love me?" "Yes, I love you." "How much?" "Like a son. I love you like my son." "Like your son," said the lion as he laid his head in his lap. Every day, the lion asked the same question. He never seemed to get tired of hearing those words. But the woodcutter got tired of saying them day after day, week after week, month after month, until finally one day when the lion asked again, "Woodcutter, do you love me?" The woodcutter answered, "What is wrong with you? Are you stupid? You keep asking the same questions. You annoy me." He stood up and walked away. The lion said nothing, and they went back to work without speaking. The next day, when the woodcutter went out into the forest, the lion was there. The lion said, "Woodcutter, do you carry a knife?" "Yes, I always have a knife," said the woodcutter. "Is it sharp?" "Yes, it's very sharp." "Then I want you to do something for me. I want you to climb up onto my back and cut open the skin." "What?" said the woodcutter. Of course not. I'm not going to do that. That would hurt you. I don't want to hurt you." But the lion insisted, until finally the woodcutter agreed. He climbed up onto the lion's back and he cut open the skin. It bled. When it stopped bleeding, the woodcutter and the lion looked at each other, and the lion said, "Woodcutter, run. Run for your life before I kill you and eat you." What do you mean?" said the woodcutter. You don't really mean those words." But as he looked into the lion's eyes, he saw that he meant those words. So the woodcutter turned and he ran as fast as his legs would pump, because he knew he was running for his life. But as he ran away, he heard the lion speak. "Woodcutter, remember my words this day. The pain of a cut will soon go away, but the pain of cruel words will stay and stay and stay." The power of a story. Well, now I want to give you the second reason for telling stories, and that is to train people to listen. Storytelling is human to human. The teller is giving, the listener is receiving. We open our ears, our eyes, our mind, our heart, and we imagine the story. Many years ago, I lived outside of Denver, and I had been hired to go to Wyoming to do a workshop on storytelling. I flew back into Denver, and in those days, there wasn't the beautiful Denver International Airport that exists now. It was old, it was dingy, and you had to go down into the bowels of the airport to get your luggage. It was a 50-50 chance if your luggage would be there. And on this particular day, it was not. I had no luggage. I was tired, I was hungry, I was frustrated because nobody seemed to be able to figure out what had happened to my luggage. When all of a sudden, from across the room, I heard a child call out, "Mom, look, it's my storyteller." She didn't say it's a storyteller or the storyteller. She said, "It's my storyteller." I didn't know her personally, but sometime I had been to her school, I had told a story, and possibly I had looked into her eyes and she looked into mine, and I became her storyteller. She and I were one. And though I went home that night empty of luggage, my heart was full with the power of story. The third reason for telling stories is to pass on history, personal or folk or family. And I'm going to focus right now on family history, because we think we will remember the stories about how our ancestors came to the United States, or where that old clock in the den came from, or who that is in the black and white photo that was found in the bottom of the trunk at your grandmother's house. But we don't remember them unless we tell them or write them down and pass them along or record them. There was a favorite family story in my family about my father. Now, my father was an Army, he was in the Army, he graduated from West Point, and I always thought of him in his uniform, leading soldiers and riding in tanks. He taught me horsemanship and archery. He was my hero. And in many ways, I thought of him as being perfect. But when I visited his mother, my grandmother, I would ask her to tell the story about my father and the time he got in a fight with my Uncle Dick, his younger brother. Now, first of all, you need to know that my grandmother was a rather austere woman, a strong businesswoman. She ran a radio station in Pierre, South Dakota, and she raised two boys pretty much on her own because her husband had died. So when my father got in trouble, he was punished by being put in the closet. And before you begin to think child abuse, let me tell you that this closet was wonderful. In fact, we chose to play inside the closet when we visited. It was huge, it had light, lots of things to put on and play and pretend. So my father, who was about 8 at the time, was in the closet, and my grandmother was at the dining room table, sitting at the head of the table. On either side were a couple of her sisters, my great aunts and their husbands. And after a little while, they heard the closet door creak open. My father's little head looked out, and my grandmother said, "Well, Robert, are you ready to behave?" And my father said, "Nope, just peeking," and shut the door. Every time I visited my grandmother, I wanted to hear that story because it made my father real. It made him human. It made him just like all the rest of us. And it was an important family story. You must keep those stories alive. What is the meaning of your last name? And how did you and your spouse meet? And why was your great-grandmother called the Rock, but never in her company? Record the stories and keep them alive. The fourth reason for telling stories is to bring literature alive. And this story is about my grandfather. He was Welsh. He was the son of a congregational minister. He was also a cowboy, a circus barker, a soldier. And when I knew him, he was a Shakespeare professor at the Rapid City School of Mines. Now, Rudyard Kipling once said, "If history were told in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten." My grandfather understood that. He knew that Shakespeare is not meant to be dissected and diagrammed and analyzed. It's meant to be spoken. It's a story, all of his marvelous plays. And so my grandfather told the stories behind the stories, and he memorized the words of Shakespeare, and he brought him to life. In fact, he did it at home. Whenever he would wash his hands, he would say, "Out, out, damned spot." And we all knew that it was not just my grandfather saying those words, but centuries of storytellers before him and actors who had interpreted that line and told that story. The next reason, the fifth reason for telling stories, is to bring us wisdom and courage. Stories that are frightening, such as the ones about Black Annis, the cannibal hag of the Scottish Moors, and La Llorona, who roams the waters of Mexico searching for her drowned children. These stories give us the wisdom to stay away from those places. Or stories like the original Red Riding Hood, a terrifying story, but it's one that gives us the courage to face the wolf, which of course is symbolic for the stranger or something that is so terrifying. Hilary Mantel described in her Man Booker nominated book, The Mirror and the Light, how these old folk tales can change our lives. She said, "In stories, the odds are evened. The devil knocks down our hero and up he gets. The outcast is restored to his rights. The youngest brother, called Simple, becomes the richest of all. The gruel-fed serf feasts on the sweet flesh of the roe, and the swine boy strides from his hovel and builds a crystal house." Nobody writes any better than Hilary Mantel, but she's showing how those stories give us wisdom and courage. I want to give you an example in my life, and it's about my mother. She was a storyteller and actress extraordinaire. One of my greatest joys was telling stories in tandem with her, such as Frog and Toad for children or The Death of King Arthur for adults. But a year ago, in October of 2019, at age 94, she had an unsuccessful surgery that resulted in internal bleeding. She opted to forego further surgery and accept her eventual death. We spent the next 28 days together discussing what happens after death, watching videos of her 3-year-old granddaughter wearing the tutu that I wore when I was 3, talking about the family, telling stories, reading aloud Little Women, singing songs, and waiting. She was not afraid. She just wanted reassurance that she would be reunited with my father, of which I was absolutely positive because they were truly one spirit. It was a difficult, sweet, heartbreaking, joyous time for us. As she slipped closer toward death, I searched desperately for acceptance and peace. I found some of it in a story she and I used to tell in tandem at conferences throughout the Rocky Mountain area and here in Oregon. It's a Southern story called Mr. Death and the Red-Headed Woman. It's about a woman named Maud who believes that she's in love with Billy Bedam Bangtree. But when Billy is shot in a barroom brawl, she heads out looking for Mr. Death to bring Billy back. Mr. Death agrees that he will do that if she will ride with him on his horse twice around the world and watch the work that he does. She agrees, and off they go, and Maud sees things she had never experienced or imagined. But the words from the story that are so important to me were what she learned whenever Mr. Death came for someone. These are the words. When Mr. Death came, the living couldn't see him. They'd weep and wail for the sorrow in their hearts. But the dying, they rose up to greet him. They had a smile on their face and their arms open wide, greeting him as a friend. Remembering those words and the times we shared them on stage gave me some peace and courage and wisdom. The sixth reason for telling stories is that it allows us to connect. Michelle Obama once said, "When we share our stories, we are reminded of the humanity in each other. When we take the time to understand each other's stories, we become more forgiving, more empathetic, and more inclusive." And so it was for me when I went to the Isle of Barra, which is the outermost southernmost of the Hebrides Islands. I was there to collect stories about the other world, the fairy folk. One evening I was in the pub with several fishermen who had finished their day's catch, and I asked if they knew any of these stories of the other world. One fisherman said to me, "Oh no, we don't believe in stories of the fairy folk. But have you heard about the haunted house just down the road a wee bit?" Everybody in the pub nodded their head in agreement because they all knew the story. And he proceeded to tell me the story about the 3 fishermen who drowned, and now they haunted the halls of that house, their oilskins rubbing together so you could hear them. They brought me into their story and into their place and into their hearts, and we all became one at that time. They also asked if I wanted to spend the night at the haunted house, but I politely declined. The 7th reason for telling stories is the one that changed my life in immeasurable ways. And that is that stories enlighten us about other worlds and other times and other ideas and other people. When I was young, I read a book called Born Free, and then Living Free, and then Forever Free, and I was determined to someday be in Africa. It finally came true. I went there to collect stories in Kenya. The first place I went to was to the university in Nairobi to speak to Dr. Chris Wanjala, who was head of the literature department, to find out what advice he had for me, Mama Mzunga, the white woman, out traveling and asking people for stories. I will always remember what he said. He told me not to stop the story, once it has begun being told. He said, if you stop the story, you have briefly stopped and shortened the life of the storyteller. I love that idea that the story is literally part of our blood and our bones and the pumping of our heart. And so it is when we pass them on, we are literally giving ourselves to our listeners. I collected over 100 stories, traveling with a member of the Kikuyu people. His name was Kadema Kakathi. And every time we would return to the Land Rover after hearing stories, he would say, Nzuri sana, very good, for all the beautiful stories we had heard. After I returned to the United States, I wrote a book about my experience, and I put in a proposal to speak about it all at the International Reading Association Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. My proposal was accepted, and I was delighted to go, but I was also somewhat worried because I knew that a portion of my audience would be African American, and I am obviously not African, but I was telling stories from the home of their ancestors. I wondered how that would be received. So I told my stories. I showed slides back in those days. Today it would be a PowerPoint. And I talked about the stories behind the stories and my experiences with the people. And I told some of the stories that they had given me. After it was all over, a woman came up to me, an African-American woman. She was dressed in West African clothing. She was just beautiful. And she said to me, I want to talk to you. I was worried. And then she said, when I walked in here and I saw you, I thought, but I stayed and I listened. And then I heard the love in your heart, and I saw the love in your eyes. And I just have one thing to say to you, sister. And she gave me a big hug. I have always had that in my heart as a powerful reminder about how important it is to be culturally sensitive when you are telling stories from outside of your own culture. Do your homework. Speak to the people that come from that culture. Be aware that some stories are sacred or belong to tradition or belong to an individual or can only be told at certain times of the year. Be humble, be respectful, and learn all that you can before giving that story. The eighth reason for telling stories is to bridge gaps. There are so many gaps in our lives created by prejudice or fears or sexuality. Think of the stories behind these names of people. Matthew Shepard, George Floyd, Christine Blasey Ford, Alan Lurdy. Their heart-wrenching stories have brought us to a better understanding about those outside of our own privilege and experience. And finally, the ninth reason for telling stories. That is simply a combination of everything I've said to you, plus the power of imagination, how it strengthens our imagination. The example that I want to give to explain this to you is all about my daughter, Jamie Rose, whom you met earlier when we lit the chalice. I adopted Jamie Rose from Vietnam after many, many years of disappointment, wanting so much to be a mother. Finally, my dream came true, and I brought home my little bundle of joy. She was 3 months old at the time. Right from the beginning, I talked to her about her adoption. I read stories about adoption. I made it a common word in our language. And one of her favorites, both of our favorites, a book called I Love You Like Crazy Cakes. It was written by Rose Lewis and beautifully illustrated by Jane Dyer. The picture book is about Rose Lewis's journey toward adopting a child in China. And oh, every page is luscious and luxurious with all kinds of things to look at and discover. And we had wonderful times looking at that book every night, reading it over and over and over again. In fact, we also made up a song about it, and it went like this. I love you like crazy cakes, like crazy cakes, like crazy cakes. I love you like crazy cakes, for you are my joy. Every night we read that story, sang that song. But one night it was different. I had just finished reading the story and I was about to turn out the light when all of a sudden her head popped up from the crib and she said words from the book she had never spoken before. She said, I waited for you my whole life. The power of story. My father used to tease my mother and me about the word storyteller, insisting that people don't know what a storyteller is. We would reply that Steve Jobs once said the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. We would quote Plato, who said, those who tell stories rule society. And he would reply that people don't know what a storyteller is. So we would come up with lofty titles such as oral history specialist, or imagination curator, or humanity conductor. But in the end, we always went back to the fact that we are all storytellers, no matter the language. West African griot, Irish Shanachie, Scottish Scalecha, French conteuse, Spanish cuentacuentos, Kenyan Mwanya hadithi, English bard, storytellers, one and all. In this world that is more and more influenced by lies and rumors on social media, gadgets that make life more complicated, and cruel words that create barriers, we must remember the power of human connection, which is our stories. There are studies that give us statistical and medical proof that one-on-one communication is essential to the growth of the brain, but I am talking about the growth of the human spirit and the heart. When we take moments from our busy lives to tell a story, we give of ourselves. When we listen, we allow ourselves to respond to all that the storyteller is giving. Give, receive. Receive, learn. Learn, tell. Tell, imagine. Keep the stories alive. Thank you so much.
I'll be singing John Denver's lovely song, Sunshine on My Shoulders. And if you know it from those days in our lives, then please sing along. And I'm also happy to say that today I have Chris Patrick's bass in a box. So this is an experiment today, and I hope you enjoy the song. Hold on, whoops. There we go. Sunshine on my shoulders makes me happy. Sunshine in my
Please join me as we say our covenant together. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. If you lit a chalice in your home, please extinguish it now. I would like to remind everyone that the fellowship's annual meeting will begin soon after this service ends. We will not have breakout coffee hour sessions today. Please stay on this Zoom session and join us for our annual meeting. Each week, we have the opportunity to share our resources in support of the life of this community and its work in the larger community. You may donate by visiting our homepage, writing a check and mailing it in, or following the directions that will appear on the screen. If you are able to give, thank you for your generosity and support. Our closing benediction is from Cynthia Landrum. We leave this gathered community, but we do not leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.